John Scott, Jonathan Acosta here in Orchard Park as the Bills with just a walkthrough on this Wednesday ahead of their short week building up to facing the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football. Of course, you can see that on Channel 2. Let's start off with some injury notes. We already heard from Sean McDermott yesterday. Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson not expected to play and will not play against the Ravens. But a little more encouraging news from McDermott today, saying that today's just a walkthrough, but he doesn't know. Maybe Thursday, maybe Friday, they'll get onto the practice field and participate in some capacity.
And at least with Taron Johnson, they didn't put him on IR, so in your head you're kind of thinking that 4-week time frame. Well, that 4-week time frame, at least for Johnson, would specifically put him in with the possibility of coming back for that Houston Texans game. So I think if Sean McDermott is already saying, hey, there's a chance that maybe you see him in a limited capacity on Thursday or something like that, it bodes well for then when they get back to going full speed on Wednesday at full practice, maybe a full participation for at least for Taron, if not Terrell Bernard as well.
And McDermott saying the other day that he doesn't envision either of them going on injured reserve. And frankly, this would have been all of a waste of time not putting them on injured reserve immediately upon suffering their injuries. So the hope is you might get one, maybe you get both back in a week, but it will not be against the Ravens. Tylen Grable dealing with a groin injury, I believe it is,
yes.
And he's probably out a couple weeks, and Kyrie Elam limited as he's dinged up as well. But we'll see
neck injuries,
and we'll see, though, their progress as the week goes on, Elam in particular here. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball to start. Josh Allen, another AFC Offensive Player of the Week award, 13th time he's won that honor. But to me, there's two sides of this. Number one is it's showing that the success that can come not only in the results of winning football games, but with Allen individually, with the everybody eats mentality, and then we'll go into his clarification of his high praise of that. But let's start with the everybody eats mentality and the fruits that are coming from that labor.
Well, I think when you watch these first three games, what stood out to me, even being on the sideline Monday night, is just how comfortable Josh looks, how in control of the offense. He's playing in a way more efficient manner. He leads the league in passer rating, in QBR. He has no interceptions so far this season, which is obviously a change from the Josh Allen that we're used to seeing that is towards the top of the league in touchdowns, but also towards the top of the league in interceptions. Just playing a lot more comfortable in this offense. Does that have something to do with maybe not having to force feed a number one wide receiver? Who knows? But it just looks like he and Joe Brady are on the same page when they are scheming up an attack for the game. When they go out there and Josh is out there on the field executing this game plan, it seems like him and Joe Brady kind of have the quarterback offensive coordinator chemistry that you want to see. And to your point, he's spreading it out to a bunch of different guys. What was it? 6 different players scored a touchdown in that game against the Jags. Obviously, the 4 passing touchdowns to 4 different players. And it's been different guys in each game other than Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is really come strong as the number one receiver. Let's talk about him a little bit later. But you have a guy like Keon Coleman catching his first touchdown against the Jags. We caught up with him today, and he talked about how him playing with Josh and the biggest thing that he's learned in the first 3 weeks is sort of kind of developing that chemistry and keeping plays alive and knowing where to go, because Josh is a quarterback that can always keep the play alive. We saw it on the touchdown pass to Dalton Kincaid. So it's encouraging for this offense that it's still an offense that is learning more about itself every week, but even amid that process, they are still performing at the highest level in the league right now.
And Allen and others have really given high praise to the unselfishness of the group, and no one really feeling the need, or they're feeling a need amongst the group that, hey, I need the ball. Some have taken those sort of comments early on in this season as a shot at Stefon Diggs in particular. Allen addressing it actually ultimately head on and saying, listen, people will continue to try to make this thing a thing between him, some sort of a riff. Allen says, I loved Stefon Diggs. I loved him. I loved 14. I still do love him. It's a conversation that will certainly be more at the forefront next week as the Bills go face Diggs for the first time in the Houston Texans. But just an interesting thing that Allen, for a group of guys and a team and an organization that oftentimes likes to say, we don't listen to the outside noise, clearly Allen is listening to it, he's hearing it, and he wants to make it known probably before you even get into Houston, not to put anything out there that, hey, let's nip it in the bud. My uplifting my current teammates is not also an attempt to knock down the previous.
And I think when you know the person that Josh is, you listen to his press conferences, I don't think he's the kind of guy to take shots, whether it be outright shots or subtle shots. And when I was listening to that post-game press conference and I heard that soundbite, I didn't take it as him taking a subtle shot at Diggs. I think he's just a guy, we talk about the flow and the zone that he's playing in offensively. I think this is just a guy that is truly happy playing football right now with this offense, this group of wide receivers. The number one target right now is the guy who's open. He's spreading the wealth. Khalil Shakir, you get a pass. Like Oprah, Shakir, you get a pass. Davis, you get a pass. Ty Johnson, you get a catching touchdown. To use the phrase, everybody is eating in this offense, and I think Josh is just legitimately happy about the success that the offense is having. And I think whatever Stefon Diggs is doing in Houston right now, or whatever Stefon Diggs did in the past for Allen and for this Bills offense in the past, is not in his head right now. He's focused on the success that this Bills offense is having right now and how they can sustain that.
You mentioned Khalil Shakir. One thing that has maybe stood out of Allen's earlier performance more than anything else, he's always at the bottom in terms of yards after the catch. He's second in the National Football League in yards after the catch right now. Khalil Shakir, a big reason for that. I saw the note, 27 of his targets he's now caught 27 in a row, which is tied for an NFL record. We'll see. Guys like Joe Brady, they're aware of those types of numbers and historical moments. And I think early on in this game against Baltimore,
swing pass,
you'll give him something easy to get him that. But while there isn't a true number one, you kind of had a feeling as we threw out so many times, Shakir, the only one of the group entering the season who'd ever caught a pass in an NFL game from Allen. The chemistry, the comfortable nature between the two of them, it's been evident through 3 games. He is not a number one guy, but he's been the most comfortable target for Allen.
You sort of saw this coming towards the end of last season, right? As they start to make that playoff push to get on a hot streak towards the end of the season. Shakir was not putting up gaudy numbers per se, but he seemed to be a guy that Josh would go to in key moments, came up with some big plays. The one that always stands out is the touchdown against the Steelers where it was like a pinball just bouncing off guys and scores the touchdown. And then you mentioned the rack ability. It's something that Brandon Beane talked about this offseason where they were looking for guys that brought that rack ability. Curtis Samuel being one of those guys. Keon Coleman is not the fastest guy, but he's someone that they talked about his ability to run after the catch. Khalil Shakir, though, standing on top of all of them. I posted his route chart from Next Gen Stats after the Jags game, and you see just a bunch of green. The white shows the route that he ran, and then the green is the run after the catch. And there's green all over the field, including on that 27-yard touchdown catch. Short over the middle, and then he takes it up the sideline. I think hits the spin move, and then bounces off another guy into the end zone. He's a guy that we talk about Josh being in an offensive flow and in a zone. Shakir seems to be kind of in that same zone right now, catching everything that comes this way, and he has just this uncanny ability to bounce off defenders and keep finding yards. Keon Coleman said it's like watching a little kid run. He's never seen a guy bounce off defenders and maintain his balance the way that Khalil Shakir has. So, yes, he's not a nominal number one receiver, but by definition, when you're the guy that leads the team in targets, receptions, is tied for the team lead in receiving touchdowns, you're the number one receiver, whether it's by definition or by de facto.
The interesting thing that was incredibly surprising to me when I looked it up yesterday, Ravens, you're usually thinking this stout, great, challenging defense. They're dead last in the NFL through 3 games against the pass at 291 yards allowed per game. That doesn't mean it's going to be another 47-10 Josh Allen AFC Offensive Player of the Week performance Sunday night, but it also doesn't mean that you should expect it to be a knockdown, drag-out fight where he's fighting and clawing to get everything. This very well could continue for yet another primetime performance.
It's interesting because the Ravens are kind of this team that they have some very strong strengths and they have some very weak weaknesses. You mentioned the pass defense. They're also the most penalized team in the league. I think it's a little over 10 penalties per game, whereas the Bills are one of the least penalized teams in the league so far. So a big play gets called back for a holding. You know, penalties can have a huge influence on the game. But at the same time, they have one of the strongest rush defenses in the NFL and one of the strongest rushing offenses in the NFL. You wonder if some of that has to do with that defense playing against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in practice and everything. So, yes, I don't anticipate this game coming up in Baltimore being a 17-14 type of game or one where the Bills necessarily go out and James Cook has another offensive player of the week performance in the sense of running for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, but Cook could still have a big part in this offensive game plan with passes out of the backfield. He dropped what would have been a touchdown against Jacksonville. A beautiful route up the sideline. Josh put it in his hands, and Cook dropped it. Cook has been better with the drop issues so far this season, but you wonder if that's a play that Joe Brady goes, it didn't work out, but I'm going to save it in my back pocket for another time when I might need that one.
We'll look at the running back who caught the touchdown on a kind of a wheel route at the end of the game, or the end of the first half. It was Ty Johnson.
It was basically the end of the game.
It was not. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You mentioned Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, a 1-2 punch. You hear guys like Von Miller talk about watching how amazing they were in the very first drive of their season together against the Kansas City Chiefs, and thinking to himself, all right, they're going to be a problem. Sean McDermott calling Derrick Henry a future first ballot Hall of Fame running back, a once-in-a-generation type player. Lamar, 2-time reigning MVP, and we've heard people multiple times, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, even after the game immediately on Monday night, throwing in the reigning MVP, the best record in the league a year ago. They're fully aware of what the Baltimore Ravens were, what they still are, and it starts with that now two-headed rushing attack.
And I'm very interested for this game because the Bills are 3-0. They're firing on all cylinders. If there's one critique I would have of the defense, it's not very a critique, but just something I'm interested to see more of, is them against a strong running team. If you think back to week 1, they play a quarterback who's mobile in Kyler Murray, and a very good running back in James Conner. And I think the Cardinals averaged 5 yards per carry. They ran the ball, I think, for over 120 yards. The Cardinals went up in that game 17-3, and then the Bills figured things out both offensively and defensively in the second half. Now you go on the road, a hostile environment, Sunday Night Football against the Ravens, a team that, for all of their deficiencies, they know their identity. They're going to run that rock with Lamar and Derrick Henry. And when they're firing, we've seen the Chiefs had their struggles stopping them in the first half of that season opener. And then the Cowboys, they didn't figure things out until it was too late in the fourth quarter. So a good challenge for this Bills defense, to where after the game scripts the last 2 weeks have kind of made the games different than some of these close games that we've been expecting. A good challenge for them to see a litmus test, if you will, for where they stand through 4 weeks. I'm interested to see the play of Dorian Williams and Balin Spector, right? Because if this is Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, you're like, the veteran presence and their knowledge and their skill set, they're equipped to handle that. Balin Spector and Dorian Williams have done well stepping in for them, but this is obviously their biggest challenge yet.
Vic Carucci, our partner in crime here, mentioned before the Jacksonville game, desperate teams are really challenging to deal with.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens are 1-2. They got win number 1 and almost blew it against Dallas a week ago. I think they're still a very desperate team, considering the expectations with them and considering how they've looked.
And the Steelers are 3-0 in their division.
1-3 would put them in a really challenging position in an AFC that, while it doesn't have the shine that maybe we thought it did at the beginning of the season before it began, 1-3 is a tough hole to put yourselves in. Let's see if there's extra urgency coming from this team playing at home, understanding this is a smoking hot football team in the Buffalo Bills, but we are in dire straits right now to round out the first quarter of the season.
And we talked about this earlier, a team that says they don't listen to the outside noise, but in reality, all of the teams listen to the outside noise. The Bills, like every team, relish being in the underdog role. So how do you think they feel knowing that they're 3-0 and they're technically underdogs going on the road to play a Ravens team that's 1-2? Think that's something that, even if it's not spoken about in the locker room, the guys will find out about it one way or another, and there's nothing better for a football team that's already playing well to all of a sudden be in an underdog role. I think that's something that this team is going to relish, the opportunity to go on the road in a primetime environment in front of a national audience. It's the game of the week this week, and kind of show everybody, hey, these performances that have been put together are not flukes. This is the team that the people in that locker room thought that they had and that they're now showing on the football field this season.
I think it's going to be a great one. And once again, you can see it Sunday Night Football on Channel 2, and leading into that at 6:30, we will have a special edition of Sports Talk Live. Jonathan Acosta will be a part of it, Lindsey Moppert, Vic Carucci, and myself. We will be in Baltimore on the field at M&T Bank Stadium to get you ready for this football game, and of course throughout the week here on Channel 2. With Jonathan Acosta, I'm John Scott for Channel 2 Sports.